Hi, everyone. Welcome to Doing Sociology. I'm Dipali and very happy to have you join us today. We have something very, very interesting to share with you today. We have a very exciting series that we're announcing today, and we're having a panel discussion to introduce the series. The series is titled Pathaan, Meri, Jaan, Reflections, Memoirs, Analyses. The series is curated by Professor Gita Chadha, and the series has different pieces centered on our very favorite, the Shah Rukh Khan's latest release, Pathaan. Today's panel discussion is an introduction to the same. Not wasting more time, I would like to introduce our panelists today. We have with us Bindu Menon, who teaches media studies at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. Her piece in the series is titled Interrupted Histories, Pathaan, Ambivalent Fans, and the Affection for Cinema. We have with us Deepa Srinivas, who teaches at the Center for Women's Studies, University of Hyderabad. Her research interests and publications include popular visual culture, childhood studies, and feminist pedagogy. Her favorite pastime is watching films and lazing, and her pet peeve is she doesn't get to do this enough. And her essay is titled Staging Spectres and Spectacle of Love, Loss, and Pathaan. We have Dr. Gita Chadha, who's a feminist sociologist working in the area of gender and science. She's visiting professor at Azim Premji University and presently holds the Ubaid Siddiqui Chair Professorship at the NCBS Bangalore. Her interests lie in social theory, feminisms, and visual cultures. And her essay in this series is titled Bollywood, Shah Rukh Khan, Pathaan, a memoir she writes and she writes an autoethnography prompted by the film Pathaan. Like I mentioned earlier, she's also the curator, editor of the series. We have Paromita Vohra, who's a filmmaker, writer, and committed Antakshari player. She is also the founder and creative director of Agents of Ishq, a platform about sex, love, and desire for Indians. Her essay is titled Vasant Sena's Linchpin, Memory, Games, and Remembering in Pathaan, a reading in 3 scenes. We have with us Pushpesh Kumar, who teaches sociology at the University of Hyderabad. His essay is titled Pathaan, Military Masculinity and Possibility of a Queer Reading. We also have with us Rukmini Sen, who's professor of sociology at the School of Liberal Studies, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, Delhi. And her essay is titled Besharam Rang, Kahan Dekha, Love, Family, Watan, Sociology. We also have with us Sayantan Datta, who is a science journalist and faculty member at the Center for Writing and Pedagogy, Kriya University. We also have Bishal, who is doing their PhD at HBCSE TIFR, Mumbai. And they have written a joint essay, which is titled Bahut Kuch Hota Hai, towards a reparative reading of Pathaan. And finally, we have with us Swati Dyahadroy. He's teaching women's studies in the Department of Women and Gender Studies, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, and Sneha Gole, who's a Fulbright postdoctoral fellow, research associate, 5 Colleges Women's Studies Research Center, Amherst. She's currently on sabbatical from the Department of Women and Gender Studies, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, and they have written a joint essay, which is titled Pathaan, Fractured Hope for Feminist Fans. I welcome all our panelists today. Very, very happy to have you all with us. To begin our conversation, I would first like to invite Dr. Gita Chadha, who's the curator of the series, to sort of tell us about the genesis of this series, how it came into being, where did you get this idea? So over to you, Dr. Chadha.
Hello, everyone. Dipali, thank you very much. Firstly, let me thank Doing Sociology for hosting this series. And it is, for me, an extremely unconventional one to do because it's not, necessarily the area that one has been writing on. But I think what prompted me to sort of jump into this was simply the fact that, the kind of political situation that we are living in. And within that context, what was happening also to Bollywood, not just in terms of the political, in terms of the political economy of Bollywood and how we needed a film to revive it. All that was there, but then I also saw a growing sort of love for Shah Rukh Khan around me, amongst particularly women, particularly feminist women, and I was puzzled and intrigued by it. And not that it is something new, but I thought that it should be a moment where we could invite a few friends, a few people within the field to actually reflect upon what our relationship with the film Pathaan was. What did it trigger in us? Where did it take us? So I think that was really the idea. And then we sort of wanted to expand it in terms of our own engagements with cinema per se, popular cinema particularly, and take this moment to reflect. We all know that Pathaan, when Pathaan was released, there were people, for example, who have worked with a certain disdain, a certain, skepticism about the popular, but they all decided that, okay, now it's time to go and see Pathaan because it's a political choice. So how does the love for the popular and what Bindu calls affect for cinema come together in this moment of also bringing a politics to come into it? So these were some of the ideas, and then it just rolled, because as Sayantan says in the piece that they wrote, that it was just a conversation in Pune at the Women's Studies Center. We were just eavesdropping, talking this, that, and suddenly it just emerged that said, let's do it. And then we found a lovely host in doing sociology. So that's how it really happened. And I think when I was thinking whom to invite, it just went to friends and people thought to that a significant way. So I'm going to be sort of roughly trying to aim for at a few rounds of discussion. First one is on the kind of methodologies suggested from the pieces to look at popular cinema, and the kind of pieces that we use in our own essays. So I'm going to start with Paromita's extremely, for me, an extremely evocative beginning, to which I think suggests to us a very very good methodology of looking at the popular, which is so she starts wonderfully, and I'm going to read a little bit from there. And she's doing this in the piece all the time, referring to Bollywood, to referring to Bollywood itself for the film. So she says, in the film Utsav, directed by Girishrat Karnad in 1984, when a young man, Charu Datta, and the famed courtesan Vasanta Sena first make love, she is clad in an elaborate ornament. Gold chains festoon her entire body, and she asks him to undo them, unwrap her, so to speak. The process takes a tantalizingly long time and ends with them both tangled up together, limbs and chains. Then next made. This again, he laughs and says, this time it will not chains, falls away, leaving only the skin. The earlier elaborate undoing had been a sensual ruse, seductive introduction of bodies. Now they may slide softly into the place where memory holds the key to lovers' intimacies. Yeah. So then she goes on to say, like Vasanta Sena's linchpin, first Pathaan, where Deepika Padukone asks Shah Rukh Khan, are you a Muslim? She's referring to that scene. And she says, like Vasanta Sena's linchpin, this scene opens up the film, reveals teasingly the concerns that pulsate through the film but do not determine its rather nominal plot, and invites the audience into an intimate embrace of film history. Pathaan ki mehman nawazi, if you will. So I want Paramita to speak to us a little bit about this as a metaphor, and how does it help to look at the popular
and the film I think also. That Pathaan in particular is very self-conscious in doing what films often do, especially more in the last few years, which is continuously refer to each other, right? So that for the viewer of Hindi films, the whole of Hindi film is the text that we are looking at. And of course, the life of the movie star and everything that we know around the world of the movies, all the gossip magazines, their personal biographies, so they are all a part of that text, and we are bringing all of that into it. And I think that particularly Pathaan, I felt was asking to be read in that way, like an intimacy with the older kind of relationship of the film and the audience. Because right now the audience relationship is very mediated by a kind of corporatized structure, right? So it's very much by a kind of market research approach that films are made. Whereas this kind of slightly more untidy relationship, risky relationship between filmmaking and the audience requires that kind of an intimacy. So I think that that particular film, because he says, I was born in the cinema. And so already it has become unreal, mythic in quality, and it is asking you to start thinking that way. And of course, we know that the film is continuously doing that, even when it's saying Pathaan ka vanvas khatam hua. These like little bits of references to the way that Hindi films are made and to the way that Hindi films are understood by audiences, sometimes consciously and sometimes not consciously. So I think that once, at least for me, when that scene happened, and I guess my way of analyzing the film is very experiential, because I started thinking thoughts as soon as that scene happened. And then those thoughts became the movie for me. And those are the thoughts that remained in my mind continuously with every conversation I had about Pathaan, which also I think is very interesting, that actually each conversation about Pathaan that I had with someone else unraveled a new spool of memory, right, about films. And I think also what is outside, I mean, in the essay, I have talked about how when he refuses to answer her question about identity with identity, but tells a story instead, for me, it's also reminiscent of the idea of hum kagaz nahi dikhayenge. And the film itself becomes like that for me, because the film pretends to be a film about saving the country, but it's really also a film about saving Bollywood. And it's also a film about saving Shah Rukh Khan. Shah Rukh Khan, who has always held out his arms for which we think is welcoming us into his embrace. But in a sense, the film is also asking us to save Shah Rukh Khan, because it's his first hit after a long time. And it is also asking us to remember all the love that we felt during the Aryan Khan arrest, to bring that into the movie, and to, I think, therefore underline this domain of love, the political domain of love, right? Because right now we also exist in a binary domain politically. And so everything is supposed to be serving a political idea, whether it's a left idea or a right-wing idea, but it is not supposed to have any existence outside these binaries. So actually, by insisting on a relationship with the movie star or with any figure that is one of love, which we saw happening during the Aryan Khan incident, right? Because during the Sushant Singh Rajput incident, we saw that it was very much possible to polarize the public into left and right, where the relationship with Bollywood, which had always been a queer domain in that sense politically, where you exist in a different way than you do vis-a-vis your respectable life. So it's actually also a reiteration of that domain, I feel, that is happening through that scene, and how the scene asks us to read the rest of the movie. So yes, that is essentially, and of course also my deep interest in Shah Rukh Khan. Like, I don't know how many things I have written about Shah Rukh Khan, right? So also for me, it's a continuous understanding of the Shah Rukh Khan persona vis-a-vis the idea of him being a superstar that is somehow meaningful to the idea of the nation, and why at different times we need him or don't need him. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, like Sayantan just said a while ago to us that one of his friends and colleagues said that you have helped them humanize Shah Rukh Khan. So I think you've done that for a lot of us.
So I think that maybe we are going to be coming to it later in the panel discussion, but sometimes people write to me saying, thank you, you allowed me to love Shah Rukh Khan. The idea of shameless love is something we will be talking about later, so I wouldn't get into
yeah. Thanks, Paromita. But you know, this entire idea of the popular being a very complex text, a text with ambiguities, a text with contradictions, a text which cannot fall into binaries, is something that I think comes off a lot in Bindu's piece also. So, I mean, I'm just also, Bindu speaks about national, so-called national Hindi cinema, the popular cinema, to another domain. And I'm going to read a little bit from her piece, which I really liked. And she says, I can't help thinking of another more familiar film industry, familiar to her, Malayalam, where Muslim social and cultural life is densely narrated. A handful of films like KL10, Sudani from Nigeria, Halal Love Story, Talumala, and Suleika Manzil unambiguously narrates it without the burden and demands of nationalism. Talumala, a montage bust in 9 chapters with 2 powerful lead actors in Tovino Thomas and Shine Tom Chacko, is a story of friendships formed through brawls, including a love story with its cinematic geography drawn across Kerala and the Middle East. Its linguistic registers a melange of lyrical Arabic in specific Malappuram dialect of Malayalam, hadiths, music calls, Mappila folk tunes, and contemporary global fashion. I gesture to this other end of the spectrum of filmmaking to remind what Hindi cinema has to deny, erase, and defer in order to being recognized as a legitimate entity. Bindu, tell us more about this.
I think this is all that I say about Malayalam film in the piece, because the rest of it is about Pathaan. So in many ways, actually, Paromita quite condensed what many of us have, explored. So memory for me was, an affection for cinema was very key for me in understanding how Pathaan worked, right? All of us have also talked about the cinema hall and so on. But the question, I'll go back to the question of ambiguity and contradictions that Gita wanted me to think through. I mean, I when I watched Pathaan and when I started observing all this kind of, unraveling and spooling of emotions around Pathaan, from, as Gita pointed out, friends who are feminists, women, men, we all, in general, we all have a certain understanding of how fandom in Hindi cinema, Hindi film industry works, who are Shah Rukh Khan fans, there is a kind of feminization that already has happened about conversations around Shah Rukh Khan, as I point out, as others point out. So in all of this, I was thinking about ambiguity actually in 3 registers. One is, of course, like all of us recognize, and Paromita also talks about it, is the ambiguity of the text itself, right? So it's it has to have invocations of a very patriotic nationalism. There is gesturing towards certain kind of feral Muslim identities, about Kashmir, etc. All of this is there, but it also has a very dense signage of, I talk about in the piece as well, the keffiye, for example, which is drawn from the larger spy universe, but it's there, right? In Salman's presence and the keffiye, and in many ways, also this nameless, rootless, but at the same time, someone who carries the memories of partition, of the larger geography of, northwestern frontier and so on in the name Pathaan itself, and so on. So there is a density of all of that. So I think the text is actually like, all of us recognize is kind of very ambiguously constructed, right? And that ambiguousness, I don't think of it as some kind of of less clarity, but I think it's kind of offering that the fan knowledge is a very important part of the film industry, right? The fan is not someone who's just there and who's just enchanted. The fan is a very knowledgeable person. So there is that. So there is a constant anticipation of fan knowledge, which is working through the text. And there is a mining of all these ambiguities in the text. That's one register which I have in mind when I say ambiguities and contradictions. The other is the what started unfolding around Pathaan, which is about the ambiguity about of the fans themselves, right? So once we move from the moment of Pathaan to the later tweet and the kind of tweets that I quote I have kind of snippets of those quotes. they're all actually pointing towards that there is something which is, like it's as Paromita said, it's an untidy sphere, but at the same time there are certain other kinds of rumblings happening in that, that it's no longer what emerges in Shayana Bhattacharya's and other kinds of conversation, which is the feminized fan. That singular fan figure is not what we saw around Pathaan. So that's the second register in which I thought there is ambiguity. Is very productive to think about this. A third is what has happened to Shah Rukh Khan's star text itself, right? So we have the romantic star Shah Rukh Khan who embraced us, invited us, etc. But there is also a shift that is happening in the last decade, which I point out, all of us actually also mentioned, which is a certain crafting. There are certain elements, the star text, Shah Rukh's own star text has something to do with his Muslim identity, right? So there are these three registers in which I think that ambiguity becomes a very powerful kind of, template through which the whole the text and how it grew into a kind of big global event is happening precisely through this ambiguities and contradictions. So this is something which what I was trying to understand as I worked looked at these three different nodes, which is the star text. But I also want to mention that we shouldn't also forget that it's also quite rewarding to pay attention to this new kind of franchise emerging that Yashraj is doing, the spy universe, etc. Because Hindi film history, which happens across many films, like Om Shanti Om, for example, or many other films, that I think is coming to a certain point where it's important to talk across fan cultures or star construction. So that's why I want to say that we need to kind of think of this as moment which is marking a few things in Hindi film history itself. So that I think is kind of summarizes why I choose ambiguities and contradictions to think about. And again, a last point, ambiguities and contradictions also vis-a-vis the new emerging OTT nation, right? So that's why my gesture towards other kinds of Muslim that exist. It is a Muslim popular, so to speak. The paragraph you cited actually illuminates some of the elements which is present there, which is not so easily available elsewhere. So those exist. So there is this. So I also wanted to point towards this, kind of comparative, composite picture of this new OTT nation in which there are different kinds of films existing. So I think it's probably very, very a rich space of ambiguities and contradictions within the film industry, around the film text, across film industries, etc. And I think there is some merit in staying with that trouble and exploring that rather than just pronouncing it as one or the other, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. And I think the comparative approach that you develop in the essay is also a very interesting one. I hope people, when they read it, will be able to engage with that. I wanted to bring in Sayantan and Bishal here, where where the kind of method that they propose, it was very interesting for me, for example, to read it as a feminist. That how do you do a queer reading of an unqueer text of the spy genre? Spy universe that both Sayantan and Bishal speak about in the essay. And they propose the reparative reading, which is a corrective reading. And it's a beautiful essay. I'd like Sayantan and Bishal to speak a little bit about what do they mean when they talk about the reparative method when we look at, say, a film like Pathaan, but it could be applied to a lot of other popular films, right? Or the popular at large.
Thanks a lot, Geeta. Those are very many kind words. uh, our engagement with the film acts, when we were asked to write this, or when we volunteered ourselves to write this essay, one of the things that I started thinking about particularly is how my being a fan of Shah Rukh Khan is often seen as an excess, right? So one can always think about, I mean, I'm often asked, it's okay to like Shah Rukh Khan as a person, but why must you like his movies? Or it's okay to like some movies, but why must you like all his movies? So in some sense, my relationship with his films or Shah Rukh Khan himself is seen as a very excessive, audacious kind of relationship. And I thought, if one can start with that notion of excess and audacity, as I try to, as we both of us try to read Pathaan, the other thing that we were both thinking about is, what does it mean to be a fan? And the way we sort of our thoughts coalesced at this idea of the fan as the fantastical. And then we thought, okay, can we ascribe some fantasy as we read Pathaan? And we were trying to think about how do we queer Pathaan as a text, and coming from this position of excess, coming from this position of audacity, we said that, okay, we can think of critiquing the film as being unqueer on the face of it, but we can also do something more. We can ascribe what we think is queerness to the film. And something that the film does talk a lot about is collectivities, right? So it talks about JOCR, Joker, as a collectivity, and there's a very interesting play on the name itself. Joker as a word also speaks to many of us queer people whose sartorial practices, whose ways of dressing up, whose ways of being have often been ridiculed with the term. But leaving that aside for a moment, JOCR as a collectivity and Outfit X as a collectivity, what we saw very interestingly is that they are about people who have either been rejected by this larger national body, the larger military body, or who decide to reject, who have a kind of rupture with their parent body and decide to reject it, reconstitute themselves in very interesting ways. They are either reconstituting themselves through the kind of disabilities that have left them out, or build these transnational collectives. So there we tried to juxtapose with the idea of chosen families, given that the marriage equality hearings are going on, the UCC discussions are going on. So we tried to juxtapose it with the idea of family. And what we propose, and we propose this with trepidation, with caution, that we can repair Pathaan of its heteronormativity by thinking about the collectives as chosen families that open spaces of queer associations, something that people in the past have called assemblages. That's where I'll stop. I'll let Bishal speak and add on in case they'd like to.
Yeah. So I think Sayantan has covered most of it, but I just wanted to say a few things, which was I mean, there is this instinctive impulse to queer and unqueer text by trying to misread it as, you know, the very superficial homoerotic kind of intimacies which are portrayed, or which are almost portrayed, you know. So that would be a very easy superficial sort of a thing, but we try to stray away from that, because then we wouldn't have sort of justified it to ourselves. But the other thing also was, there was a lot of queerness around the film. Anurag Kashyap saying that, you know, Shah Rukh Khan ko itna sundar to maine kabhi nahi dekha hai. And even John Abraham admitting that, you know, that he has transcended from a human being, that he has come this close to almost kissing him. So we thought, you know, everybody else can do that sort of quote unquote queering, but we would try to do something which we haven't tried before. And well, it acts as a gateway now that, you know, a lot of movies, a lot of texts have opened up. And I think this
Yeah.
sort of a subliminal impulse already there. I mean, in liking things which are not queer on the face of it, and somehow trying to justify it to our, our friends or our other comrades and stuff. So this has opened
Yeah.
that in some ways. Yeah.
A dilemma that a lot of us have gone through. How do we, justify our love for something to our friends? Anyway, so I think Pushpesh, want you to come in here in terms of method again. That you propose a lateral sort of a reading, and later on, of course, I also want you to talk about the contrasting masculinity that you see, say, in a film like Badhai Do and here. But a little bit before, on what do you mean actually by a possibility of a lateral reading for a popular text like Pathaan? Pushpesh, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you, Gita. And I think the job is done by the previous speaker, Paromita, Bindu, and Bishal and Sayantan. But I will just reiterate some of the points that lateral reading is basically a borrowed term. I borrowed it from Dana Settler, reading sideways. And reading sideways, it talks about how to read certain things as and create an alternative aesthetics. So in creating the alternative aesthetics is talking about we have to look into the historical entanglements and entanglements across different sides of the art. And then I also I find some resonance with Sanjay Srivastava's reading of Lata Mangeshkar, where he's talking about Gumakri, wandering around. And Ghumakri is he's borrowed from Rahul Sanskrita, who wrote in Hindi and Bhojpuri, and he's saying wandering around. So you wander around different sites and come back at one place. Then you see what is happening at the different sites, and when you come to one place, what are the dissonance and resonance? So how do you read and construct meaning through this resonance and dissonance? So I wander around law. What is happening in the legal side? I go to Shreyana Bhattacharya text. I go to queer film. I go to queer movement. So I wander around different places. And then the most important thing is the absence of erotics and sexuality of the protagonist Shahrukh Khan. And how do you read? What offers? How it offers a possible queer reading of the things. So this is what I mean by lateral reading, and as you said, the contradiction between two masculinities of this protagonist from the film Badhai Do, Rajkumar Rao and Shahrukh Khan. I think Badhai Do is overtly and explicitly a queer film, where you will find that this film Pathaan is not a queer film. It's not intended as a queer film. But definitely the marginalized groups want to own it in certain ways and create a world out of it for themselves, right? So what I'm saying that in this, but there are similarity in the sense that you will find that Rajkumar Rao is very robust. He also embodies all the resources of a police masculinity offered by the state. As Pathaan also embodies all the resources like aggression, violence, martial skills, self-discipline, and many other things, and more intelligent than the civilians. These are the,
Yes.
qualities of military masculinity. So both are performing that in a very robust manner. But you will see that he is a gay. He articulates himself as a gay. At the same time, he appears very robust. Similarly, you will see that Shahrukh Khan acts very robustly as a military person. He has the ability to do violence and aggression and everything and control the situation. He's skilled in martial art. But so he qualifies all the characteristics of military masculinity, hegemonic masculinity. But the one thing which remains is overt heterosexuality.
Okay.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
So overt heterosexuality is not on display. And that offers us to some kind of reading. And that also dispels the myth that queer men are softer, feminine, etc., etc. So both of these images and performativities into films also dispels those myths and reconstruct that there is a possibility of queerness even within the person who are acting straight, performing straight, or whatever. And yeah, so I'll stop.
Yeah. So, I had sort of reserved this for a bit later, but I'm going to read this out right away from your piece, which is Pathaan is that the form of being queer cinema discloses its protagonist. See marriage of convenience. Pathaan is overshadowed by his loyalty, projection as a war hero, which together seem to require a deflation of his erotic desire and his sexuality. But so lovely, thank you for offering the possibility of how a film like Pathaan and the masculinity that is played out by the character of Shah Rukh Khan actually can be read in along with Rajkumar Rao in Badai Do. But I also want to talk about this idea that the lateral thinking and the wandering. So when I was, for example, writing my own piece, it was extremely difficult to get handles over the kind of memories and associations and ideas. So I continuously wandered, and to bring it to anything coherent was actually a very, very difficult task. But I'm going to quickly look at Swati, Sneha, Rukmini, and Deepa, if you'd like. What do we as feminists use as methodology when we are talking about ourselves as fan and the popular per se? I mean, is it, what we bring in is our own lived experiences? And so I'm sort of going to also take you into the next set of ideas that we wanted to explore, which was the ideas of what does the popular mean to us? What does being a fan means to us? And Swati and Sneha's piece is actually extremely rich because it sort of speaks in a first person voice and also moves into the more academic tone. But I'm going to read a little bit from Sneha's piece, which actually helped. I mean, it echoed a lot of what, for example, I mean, the Sneha and I, like Swati and Sneha, belong to very different generations. But as I was reading Sneha's account of it, I was like, we all went through this. But let me sort of read a bit from Sneha's piece. So she talks about her transition from being what she defines herself, identifies herself as a reluctant fan. Yeah. And Swati, who comes out as being, a fan who claims her fanship. This process itself was very, very fascinating. Before I read, would you like to both talk about how did you discuss this amongst yourself? Sneha, why reluctant fan? I also found myself accepting that I can, as a feminist, also be a fan of anything, and particularly of a male icon, and particularly of Shah Rukh Khan, was quite a journey. And you say that it was a fight. It's lovely. My love for him was certainly not love at first sight. It was a slow burn creeping up on me over time. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, I use the word reluctant fan in a sort of, I mean, it's contradictory in many ways, and I think it's much more about the construction of a certain kind of normative femininity and learning to unlearn that, and actually, when I was thinking about it, it is actually about becoming unlimited, if I can borrow from Paromita's, film, a certain very regional caste sort of refracted understanding of that femininity. So it was about being modern, urban, middle class Maharashtrian, and juxtaposing that sort of studying
sincere sort of in the caste context as against other kinds of femininities which you saw as frivolous, etc. And so fangirling was frivolous, was about being audacious, was about being unlimited, and I think
and somewhere not intellectual, not studious. So I don't want to be her. You say that very well in the piece. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think therefore to come to terms with the fact that you could be all of this, and in fact being all of this can allow you to have a relationship with fandom, with a male idol. It also came from the idea of being uninterested in romance, right? So if you were a good woman of a certain kind, you were also uninterested in heterosexual romance till you were to be married, and therefore having this sort of very overt love for a male idol was also therefore reminiscent of of these ideas of therefore romance and unlimited romance and going in raptures, all of which was against what I thought. So for me, the journey of coming to love Shah Rukh Khan in many ways was a journey of learning to becoming unlimited, and therefore in that sense of really learning to be feminist, and dealing and also dealing with sometimes received ideas about what it meant to be feminist, right? And how did you so as a feminist you could like certain kinds of films, but how can you like like Sayantan was saying, how can you like certain kinds of films? How can you say that, I love Dar, right? Like Dar, for instance, right? A very ambiguous relationship with Dar and Bazigar, where at once, this mad love that this man has, right, for this woman is so attractive, and yet you cannot actually say, like, there's a problem with the violence, but you're also finding that obsession attractive, right? And how do you come to terms with that when you are also reading neat ideas about, love as violence, love and violence as binaries, etc. So for me, I use therefore the term reluctant fan, not to say that I'm not a fan, but to actually in many ways index this journey of learning to come to terms with a diverse set of understandings of femininities, which not only came, yes, it's so much easier therefore I think sometimes to acknowledge those that come from the community, from the caste, from the whatever, but also in some ways from the way feminist academics at certain points were looking at Hindi films, right? Because you read editorials or you read these film reviews in Manushi, and they're all about how this is not realistic. And so realism as a way of approaching the popular also shaped, so you said, oh, this is also unrealistic. And it was really about learning to say, so what? Why is it about being realistic? And, I want to why can't I love the fact that it's not realistic? And that's probably this sort of love is not going to happen in my life, but I can still, fantasize about it, dream about it, and therefore it's all right to love it. So I think that's what I wanted to sort of, talk about in that.
Thanks, Sneha, because I think, Paromita, unlimited girls for many, many, many young women in this country has been extremely liberating. You want to speak a little bit about how do you look at this, this trap and context in which many of us are, particularly as academics, particularly whether it is feminist or left liberal or whatever it is, of constantly judging the popular as being escapist, over dramatic, all of those things. I speak about that also in my essay. But tell us a little bit about Unlimited Girls and what you think it should be doing to all of us.
I will actually, because I was thinking about some things. I thought it was interesting how many times you've said, for example, I had to come out as a fan. And I'm just relating that to the things that Sayantan and others are saying about, and Bishal are saying about the queerness.
Absolutely.
The fan themselves, right? And a place where the fan gets a lot of importance is Korean drama, for example. The fan is really important and takes themselves very seriously and expects the idol, like people say, the characters often say, okay, I'm a fan, so obviously he has to take me seriously, he has to attend to what I'm saying. So, and fan love occupies its own space, which does not interfere with private romance and whatever, unlike, say, a film like Goody, where she has to understand reality. It's his fantasy, and fantasy cannot be reality. But actually, Unlimited Girls, I think, is an interesting experience because, you know, I was asked to make a film about feminism. It's not that I made a film about feminism. And it was after about 10 years of working and living a certain kind of life in Bombay, which didn't actually conform to many of the ideas that were fixed as what you should be like if you're a feminist, right? Like there was a contradiction where on the one hand, you are told to be free and make choices and do what you like. But on the other hand, there is an aspect of immoderation in some of your behaviors, especially mine, which were like, okay, being sent, like at that time, we're not working on video and we're not working in digital as an assistant. I entered working in films when people were using celluloid. So you often had to go into studios for processes, right? And I only used to, I was working in documentary film, which is supposed to be very sober. So I was considered to be very odd because I would come and I would say, oh my God, I saw Amrish Puri. And people were like, so what? So I think like this continuously operated and I would feel the falsity of it because I was living in a working class tenement housing. And I felt the kind of falsity of this political approach. It talks about people, but seems to have a strange notion of what peopledom is, right? But when I was making Unlimited Girls, there's a very like a epiphanic moment for me that I went to see an exhibition of photographs of women, Indian women from 1800 and I think 58 or something to 1947. It was a black and white exhibition. I think CWDS or someone had put together and great photographs and all of that. But I remember feeling that the women that I know in my family are not here. And I come from my mother's family is a Bollywood family, right? Like a filmy family, but no longer as such in an successful mode of being filmy by the time I was a kid. So I wasn't experiencing their success, but rather the end of their success. But my grandmother was an actress. My grandfather was famous, so everybody spoke about him. My grandmother was an actress, but she was not Devika Rani, or she hadn't done anything very like significant like that. But she was a very uncommon person, right? So I just felt like, where is that uncommon person that I have seen in Bombay over and over and over again? That uncommon woman who doesn't fit in this category. Why is she not in the exhibition? So I think those kinds of moments with classical, that kind of a edifice of feminism really made me make Unlimited Girls in a certain way, where I was trying to merge into it all the things that I loved. And over the years of filmmaking, I've often sometimes had arguments with my colleagues where sometimes I'd be like, okay, but now we'll put this shot, and my colleague will say, but why? What does this shot have to do with anything? And sometimes the fight would be resolved only by my saying, because I love it. But actually, yes, the idea of being unlimited, having no limits to what it is you like, the idea of transgression. I mean,
the idea of Beshara.
But there is no transgression if there isn't a limit, right? Like, what are you transgressing, actually? So actually, it's a non-catastrophic sensuality. Like feminism for me was a sensual thinking and all the time thinking about what life can be. It is a fantasy. What else is it, right? So when people also would say, why are you reading romance novels? I love Mills and Boons. I read many, many when I was growing up. And they were like, oh, such an intelligent girl, like you should not be reading Mills and Boons. It will give you ideas. And I'm like, thank God it gave me ideas. If I had been realistic.
We didn't have those ideas, yeah.
I think Unlimited Girls was definitely trying to incorporate the register of pleasure and the idea that the popular experience doesn't have a curriculum. It doesn't have a syllabus. It makes the syllabus. It co-creates politics as it goes through a number of mixed feelings, right? So that is why the chat rooms in Unlimited Girls have some famous feminists in them. Yeah. And also have some characters who are entirely made up, who are always speaking in the sexually ambiguous fashion about S&M and, then suddenly some boys will come in. And so that random mixture, which actually generates a political life, is what I feel I was trying to get at.
You were trying.
Similar to the Pathaan feeling, that meaning the Shah Rukh Khan-ness, the Shah Rukh factor, I would like to call it, that, that it's ambiguous, it's not filling in a category, it's destabilizing the category, but it's not destabilizing you too much, it's letting you be you, and yet it is suggesting that you can be something else. So yeah, recognizing legacy too, right? Yeah.
Because we're talking about unlimited girls and we start. I mean, I think really, therefore, I mean, why I say reluctant fan was because it's a journey of becoming fearless, and that's again actually from unlimited. You know, becoming fearless to say yes, I love this, right? And especially in a political context like ours, where if you say whatever critical of one thing, then you're automatically something else. If you say I love that, then you are automatically this thing or that, right? And so just being fearless to say I am this and that, and maybe much more that is neither this nor that. So yeah.
No, I think what Paramita also said. Sorry, Paramita, yes.
One thing that the thing is also, now that we think about it, that the character Fearless takes her name from Fearless Nadia. So actually, the way that Pathaan also is playing with that namelessness, in a way, I mean, it's echoed in what you're saying here.
Yeah. No, so this whole thing about coming out as fan, but I mean, I can identify with that because it took me a long time to come out as fan, and I still feel that maybe I'm not doing it as honestly as needs to be done, but I'm sort of trying to also fit it into my own mind language rather than my own body language or whatever it is. But there is that attempt to at least come out and say that, I can be fan. But I think, I want to take a little bit from this idea of wandering again, and what Paramita said the CWDS exhibition actually made her think about, which is something that comes about in Deepa's essay. And for example, when I was writing, my mother came alive, my father came alive, memories, associations, and my mother's love for Raj Kapoor was never spoken about by her openly. And I wondered why it didn't happen. I think, Deepa, are you with us? Deepa, you speak about how while writing this essay, you also brought in, for example, your mother, right? I mean, and as I think when we're doing any kind of feminist writings, we tend to go to our mothers, our sisters, our grandmothers. You want to speak a little bit about how that happened while you were writing? You have to unmute yourself, Deepa.
Yeah, I did talk a little bit informally about, I mean, it's the first time I actually articulated it, that we were watching one of his very, very early TV shows that he worked on Doordarshan Circus. And she'd wind up her work and then she'd say, there is something really nice and lovable and warm. And she'd say that in Odia. I can't really translate. It's not translatable. But there's something so relatable, and also we both shared that love. So when I talk about, and I use the term community, and I draw from Amrita Pritam's poem, to Varisha I turn, because it's a kind of love, I feel, that brings people together, and it happens not always. You might actually admire, like I really admire Fahad Fasil and the kind of roles that he does and the kind of masculinity that not aggressive, which is secure, which is not, always, in that kind of mode. That, but yet I don't have the same relationship with Fahad Fasil or many of the others. So not just my mother, but with other women and men and gender non-conforming people. I think when we talk about him, there is something that holds us together. And it's difficult. I know Paromita's done it, a lot of us. And I was really happy that all of us were trying to find a register to talk about. See, love is the most overused term. And yet it is so difficult to talk about it. So there is that contradiction when you come to love. And I have said, that he's probably the only star I would say I love, and without any embarrassment. But Gita, to I mean, can I talk a little more? Because I'm scared that my internet will go. Yeah, connect.
No, of course, of
yeah.
course.
Yeah, it's connected to this. I'll just, because when you asked me to talk about what kind of feminist reading or frame that we might bring to Pathaan, I was thinking of my own piece. And I was like, I mean, have I even looked at this film with any kind of feminist lens? I mean, here is this very hyper macho, hyper jingoist film. And if you read my piece, you will probably not be left in any doubt that I am admiring, full of admiration, with a little veneer of doing academic writing or whatever. And yet, I think, Gita, you made me think that I would like to claim that my admiration for the film and the star is both as an academic, as a feminist and a fan. And I think a combination of several things actually undercut that hyper masculinity, hyper patriotism, nationalism, etc., etc. And I'll just very briefly talk about a couple, because you said my mother, and so this love, from where it is coming. And it's very, very difficult to love a hyper masculine guy, you know, like, because many of us have this experience of how violent it might turn out to be. It might be very seductive. At a moment, you might get attracted, but there is threat there. First of all, Shah Rukh's persona, back from circus, Fauji, etc., those days, you know, there is a certain playfulness. He does not take himself so seriously, like a lot of men that we know do, and that the humor, even the campiness is so lovable, and the excess and everything else. So for me, as for my mother, which my mother was trying to understand what that was, it's always been a carrier of these other meanings of love, of affect. And that's why probably John Abraham says he's no longer an actor, he is an emotion. So I get you, I get him, what he's trying to say. It's like, you know, and coming to John Abraham, I mean, Shah Rukh Khan cannot even look at his chief adversary in the film with hatred. And, you know, it looks like, in fact, every time they look at each other in that close embrace mid-air, what is it if not a love story, is what I was thinking. I mean, guy, you just look at, he's supposed to be the villain. I mean, at least pretend that you hate him. But, you know, it just does not come across for all of that he's disloyal, he's betrayed. So there are those layers. And, you know, I keep saying in my piece that many fans have called it the triumph of love. And like many of you have said, it's probably the moment and where we are seeing the surge of hate, particularly also against Shah Rukh and what happened with Aryan Khan and all. SRK himself talks about love. And for myself, personally, also looking back at my mother, like Gita, you mentioned that, I feel as a woman, you know, and a lot of us from minoritized locations, minoritized in various ways, gender, sexuality, caste, etc., we are really tired of that violence, you know, and sometimes we go off social media. Like, I am a news junkie, but there are times I feel I need to heal. And so there's so much of chest thumping, so much of macho-ness around us. So the environment is just combustible with threat and aggression, you know. So in this kind of a context comes this film, which, overtly is again a hyper masculinist kind of film. So, and why do we recognize that threat, and why are we tired? Because we have seen it in different degrees, maybe not in the same way, but we have seen it and what it can do to a human being. And that's why I cite Amrita Pritam, who my mother was very aware of, and much more than, you know, I came to read her poetry much later, and I talk about bell hooks and all of that. And because, and why do I call upon them to articulate this love that we all feel? I'm not talking about just love, but because it's so I draw on them to give a language to this love. And I see, and you can all see the way you are talking, and I love all your pieces, that the inherent possibility of radical, transgressive, radical love, Hooks talks about transformative love in this film. And you can also see it in the euphoria. It's a very different kind of spectatorial euphoria. It's not just a big hit. And we have seen Sholay has happened, so many films. Here we have seen Arjun Reddy and films like that. But it's like, people were hungry for a little bit of love in today's context. And that's what touched me so much.
Thank you, Deepa. I think I had reserved this for later, but I'm going to read this little bit from your piece now also, because Varisha and Amrita Pritam have been crucial to my own journey as a person with parents who came, who were the children of the partition, and the broken national self, the broken Punjabi self, all of that. So you say here, I'm reminded of a very different context by such rhetoric. Amrita Pritam's invocation of the Sufi mystic Varisha to speak from the grave and add another page to his epic of love with Hiranja in the aftermath of the partition. For me, Hiranja could very well be the two nations. Yeah. Tharu and Lalita are right. You say, faced with the immense disorder that infects the world, the poet turns to Varisha as the bardic gatherer of a people. The parallel might appear far-fetched, you say, Hiranja being a timeless, tragic saga of star-crossed lovers and Pathaan, a testosterone charged, rather. Yeah, hyper-nationalist action thriller. Yet I think you say, in very disparate and historically situated ways, both challenge the dividing lines of patriarchy, ethnicity, and religious orthodoxy, and reunite a community of spectators across many borders. Yeah, something that you will see in quite a lot of our essays. I'm going to now turn a little bit to Rukmini, who's been very quiet, Swati, who's been very quiet. Let me sort of work my way through the next section, which is what we wanted to talk about, which is the question of the pedagogic practices and what do we do with the classroom and in the classroom. And let me just read a little bit from Sneha's piece, which also then I will connect with what Rukmini has done. So Sneha talks about the enormity of Shah Rukh Khan's stardom and how it came to her. But she also said this also coincided with the changing trajectory of my relationship with the popular, from my initial discomfort to own up my passion for it, which is something that comes in my essay too, to feminist reading of the popular as a site for reinforcement of patriarchy, to a more nuanced feminist lens of understanding the popular as a complex site of contestation over meaning. Yeah. So, Rukmini, you speak in your piece about already being Besharam, right? Already being, we all Besharam in our transgressive feminist classes, right? We talk about things that other people don't talk about. And so how does one connect this film? How did Shah Rukh Khan, you say you had a huge crush, and that's why, is that the reason he came into your classroom, for example?
Thanks, Gita, for allowing something to come out which had not till now. And yet, in some ways, practicing Besharami in certain forms and structures, I suppose. So I think, yes, in some ways, the Besharmi that I talk about in the first bit of my piece, which is teaching the social through popular, I actually connected with the Besharmi of being in the discipline of sociology and yet wanting to work on women's autobiographies and women's autobiographies of a certain time in the, between the early 19th and the early 20th century.
and trying to constantly justify to sociology departments as to, but isn't this an English language, thesis that, isn't this, shouldn't this have been in an English department? Trying to answer questions around how many autobiographies did you really look at? Because are you really being able to make any generalization out of it? And from there to, actually ask questions around silences in women's autobiographies, despite the fact that they were writing. I suppose, in some ways, many of us, I suppose all of us here, who try to be at that interdisciplinary cusp of, trying to borrow things from here and there, and making meanings out of it. In some ways, there is this Besharmi as probably a method that one, that all of us are trying to actually do. So that was one, as a PhD scholar, but also to even think that can you really use the popular in the sociology classroom as a teacher? And it as I was writing, I was just thinking that I have always talked about my students as millennial students. And then I suddenly realized that I am actually a millennial teacher, because I started teaching in 2002, with a set of, students who are also, of course, millennial. But then to ask oneself that, can you really use the popular film? I couldn't. I write on this piece that the first film that I choose for a class is Mirch Masala. And, it comes with all these settled, I suppose, feminist questions, which Mirch Masala in some ways, talk about. Art film, yes, exactly, that genre. So I think Shah Rukh comes much later, even as an example, while doing the social, while understanding the social, to use Shah Rukh Khan's film as an example comes in much later. And, with a certain amount of trepidation, but also with a certain amount of confidence, I suppose, after, maybe 7-8 years of teaching, that, that there is space for that to come out. However, doesn't come out as a fan. So it's not coming out that I'm Shah Rukh Khan's fan and therefore I'm using it. I'm using it because Patricia Oberoi has written about it. And has talked about Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge. So, it's like you draw legitimacy.
And made it respectable.
Yes, absolutely.
As Paromita said.
So, you literally draw legitimacy from, a sociological reading of DDLJ and Pardes, and therefore you use it. You don't do it in a Besharam way that, I'm his fan and therefore I'm using it. I don't think so. But having said that, I would definitely want to say, two more things that I think through with respect to, using the popular in, as a pedagogy. I would definitely, and this is something which I'm reflecting a little in the last bit of my piece, which is SRK and the changing sociological discourse. And I definitely feel, I definitely feel that the kind of concepts that even the discipline of sociology has been dealing with, the evolution of the concepts, from marriage, family, and kinship to, let's say, love, intimacy, sexuality. I'm not necessarily trying to look at it as, two binaries that exist, but the transformative element of it. There is a space of Shah Rukh Khan movies there to talk about. And not just Shah Rukh Khan movies, but there is a space to use the popular to talk about this transformative landscape into, let's say, love, intimacy, desire, challenging certain forms of heteronormativities. I think the role of the popular is something that is very important for us to kind of understand. And popular here through films, but maybe not just films. This popular could be other kinds of popular as well. It could be, songs, or it could be, literature, etc. So that is one aspect. And the other thing that I would like to actually say is that, somewhere while writing about this, and because clearly Vatan and love for Vatan is something that, many of us have touched on it in some way or the other. I was actually reminded, and this has remained with me. I was reminded of a song which comes in a different film by Meghna Gulzar Razi, and this song on E Vatan, Vatan Mere Abaad Rahe Tu, this song, and the real complexity of the way in which that song has been done, because it has been done by this Indian spy, and she's teaching this song to kids. And there is a brilliant way in which the understanding of Vatan is fractured. And I actually feel that Pathaan does that also in this fracturing of that there is only one way to talk about Vatan, or to love Vatan, or to maybe practice Vatan sociology. There isn't that one way. It is that Besharami, which I think we are all embracing in some way or the other.
Yeah, in fact, when I write about Pathaniyat and the whole idea of what is Pathaniyat, what is a Pathan consciousness, and track the history a little bit about it, the idea of a patriotism of Vatan, a longing for a land, and how it is absolutely separate in a way from the kind of jingoistic nationalism that we see. And in this film, the idea of the Pathan actually brings back the notion, and then again, it happens a lot in the poetry that we see around in the anti-CA movement, the idea of Vatan more than the idea of the country, or the nation. Anyway, so I'm also, when you were talking about this important thing, and I want Swati to come in here also, is this important thing about, can I go there out in the class and talk about the way credible for the classroom as a text in itself for many classrooms, in sociology, and to say that it's not just entertainment. A lot of students also come with this idea that ye to time pass cinema hai, isme kya hai, and to make them understand that ye time pass cinema is a sociological text that you learn to read, you understand, but also you understand it with your heart and head, and there's a lot of emotion there. So I find it, for example, extremely difficult, and I use the jocular, Sayantan, as would say. I find it very difficult as an older woman out there to go and say that, I love Shah Rukh Khan, and like your young students saying, hey, you're 60. And then you say, no, but he's also some 50 something only. So there's this constant feeling of queerness. No, you can't really, you're a sociology teacher, you're a feminist. You can't really come and talk in class and say, I'm a fan. But I think it's important to bring that in order to bring the affect in it. I want Swati to actually speak about that also. Swati, your understanding of your own fanship, your own relationship with, the iconic Shah Rukh Khan, and how do you do that in the classroom?
Yeah. The first of all is like when Sneha and I was discussing about writing, about being fan of Shah Rukh Khan, it was about the journey was more self-reflexive for me in very sociological sense, because I was trying to make sense of my love for Shah Rukh Khan, and also the way Shah Rukh Khan has been portrayed across India, and the way we were discussing him in the class. And this was about Pardes and all those films, which in that sense were, as rightly pointed out by Rukmini, Patricia Oberoi legitimizes that in the class, that we can talk about it, and we can just take her work and root it as something which is academically important. And then for me, when I put myself as a feminist, looking at the feminist standpoint method, and if I subject myself to the critical understanding of what am I doing. When I watch ranging from Hum Aapke Hai Kaun to Pathaan, if I see myself as a one who loves Bollywood and Bollywood film, any kind of a Bollywood film from Lahu Ke Do Rang to art film to or any film, and I can just watch endlessly any kind of a Bollywood film, whether it is Shah Rukh Khan or whoever it is. But then I have a special love for Shah Rukh Khan, and that love for Shah Rukh Khan actually translates into me understanding the present context and very, very serious issue in terms of that how do I make sense of the dismal reality of which I am also the one who is victim in different way, because I work on Hindu nation and nationalism, and so whenever I introduce myself as the one who interested in doing and researching that, everyone raised their eyebrows in recent days that, oh, you are doing this. And so then I also talk about like, no, I also do development, nation, all those things. And this made me think about Shah Rukh Khan more again critically. And also I want to use this metaphor which sociologists use in terms of fork tongue. That maybe in classroom I have this fork tongue where I tell my students to look at the film as a text, you analyze, you locate, etc. And the one who sits on my sofa and enjoy whether there's those open arms of Shah Rukh Khan or whatever. So I enjoy that. So how do I introduce that to my class is my challenge. And secondly, the fractured hope, which Sneha and I was discussing around, is something which is a pedagogical question for us, because in our classroom, all of us discuss things very passionately. No one tells me when I teach paper on Hindu nation nationalism that whatever you are talking, we don't agree with. Everyone agrees. There is an overwhelming response whenever we have this screening of that World Before Her film, which is about women in Hindu nationalistic organizations. And at that point, as one of our political scientists said, that where are we when we are, where are you when we are voting? And that is something which was like hit us so much. And when I was writing with Sneha this piece, we thought that yes, this is what feminist classroom may allow them, that they can criticize, but it also not repurposing what they really are thinking about, and which actually the feminist agenda or feminist pedagogy, that where we try and rethink about what I understand, what I like to my everyday, what I understand. And so to go back to Deepa Srinivas's work, which we refer on Amar Chitra Katha, that it is actually my everyday, which pushed me to love Shah Rukh Khan and to Bollywood movies, which I'd never bring into the classroom, which is actually also the everyday of my students in the class, whether they're millennial or Gen, whatever, Gen Zs or whoever they are. And I'm the one who, for them, is the ancient one, who talks about Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, which is ancient for them. And so how do I make sense of that fractured sense of reality in the feminist classroom is what Sneha and I was struggling with. And the lastly, because I know we are running out of time, and I always feel that Shah Rukh Khan's, all those films actually are talking about and located on the ground of family. And now we see suddenly he's in nation. So our question is that why? So why he is fighting for the nation? Is it really related to this anxiety of a quote unquote Muslim man to show to the entire nation that he can do this role and he can protect the nation, so that masculine man? So whether it is like all those films, I always puzzled that, well, how can Shah Rukh Khan's film talk to the narrative of the nation? And is it that so he's the superstar? Because there is this grand narrative of nation. And so he's not very happy to now do the family films, but the one who is protecting the borders and boundaries of the nation. So her masculinity, which is earlier always like fascinating for me. And I thought that, yes, Pathaan I like, maybe because right now I'm in a dismal time and the way other things are going on in the country. But I actually like Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge wala Shah Rukh more. Maybe, I don't know. So how do I make sense of this transformation which I see in Shah Rukh Khan, which is completely different? So he's not a cultural hero now. He's not the one who is protecting Indian culture, but he's protecting borders and boundaries, which is right now very important, because we have a brigade of those who will protect the culture of this Hindu nation per se. So how do I make sense of it? And that's what Sneha and I was talking when we were talking about the fractured thing, and why no Bollywood actor came in for support of those women wrestlers who made films on women wrestlers, who made film on a hockey team. So where are they now? So where is this? And that is what the grand narrative of the nation, which goes with the grand narrative of being superstar, who is very diligently and sincerely protecting the borders and boundaries, but not interested in what is happening within the borders and boundaries, maybe like our politicians right now are doing. So that's
Thanks, Swati. Yeah. In fact, I think one of the things that kept coming up around this film was, is it bordering onto a certain hyper-nationalism? And as I suggest in what I write, is that when I came out of the film, I realized that today's Indian Muslim finds it extremely difficult. How do you express patriotism, and how do you negotiate the pressure of being lynched if you're not nationalist in the given script? And how in that sense Shah Rukh Khan's this transition, I wouldn't say, I think it's there from the beginning in his films, but it sort of takes for me a complete shape in Chak De and maybe in Swades, where he plays in Swades the Hindu Mohan Bhargava, and in Chak De he plays Kabir Khan, and how the Muslim actor, the Muslim character needs to become nationalist. And as I say that in Chakte, for example, the only thing he had to romance was the nation, in the form of course, many women from different regions. Yeah, there was no heroine left for him to romance with. Yeah, so in that sense, I think the fact that this film is nationalist but requires a difficult analytical understanding for us to understand that nationalism, because it comes from a Shah Rukh Khan, it comes from a Pathaan. So I think if we've sort of talked so much, but is there anything very, very pressing that any one of us wants to say? Otherwise, we will share our favorite love scenes of Shah Rukh. Talk about them.
Let's call it Besharam round. Let's call it Besharam round.
Yeah, but I wanted to say one thing, about the nationalism. I also wanted to suggest that maybe this is not a nationalism of borders and boundaries, because it doesn't take place on a border and a boundary. Like, it takes place in some vacuum type locations, never inside, actually. Almost all the action happens in other countries, and it doesn't happen within. So I find that to be interesting. And even in terms of the Shah Rukh of Dilwale versus this Shah Rukh, I also see there's a continuity in relationship to politics of love, right? Because here it's not romantic love like that, but to take from what Pushpesh and Sayantan and Bishal are saying, there is a kind of love of dosti. For example, the narrative of Shah Rukh Khan and Salman Khan's friendship off screen, which broke apart and then came and they were reconciled. And their dosti, when he comes into the train, which also recalls Pran in Zanjeer and Yari Hai Iman, etc., etc.
All of that.
Now all of those loves, those other loves, are actually taking center stage, which is interesting. I mean, I don't know if I like it or I don't like it, but I definitely observe that it's there.
Yeah, but the end, Paramita, in that scene would say, "Desh ka sawal hai." Bachana to padega, desh ka sawal hai.
Bindu and Sayantan. But they are not talking about Desh.
They're talking about Bollywood, but they're also presenting. Yeah.
Can I just come in? Because, because you see a hyper-nationalism, you have to locate it also in the political climate today, which is so toxic and so anti-Muslim that a Muslim person, and also if you look at the biography of Shah Rukh Khan, that he was screened in US just because of his Muslim identity. His son's
so my name is Khan does all of that.
Trials and tribunal, all that. So if you look at the whole political climate, and there is an attempt to shift Bollywood from Mumbai to Noida, and there has been talk about it, pampering of certain characters, certain actors. There is always a danger of Muslim actor being looked at as other. There is always a danger of being othered, and when you are othered, then you try to legitimize as a Muslim. And in this political climate, if you just say that you are not participating in nationalism in some or the other way, then you are definitely an other. You are urban Nakshal, or you are something, or you are something, or you are something. So this is a mainstream cinema. you know.
Yeah.
And in this mainstream cinema, you need to play out a little bit of that nationalism, but nationalism maps out onto a very, very different trajectory here.
Pushpesh, I also want to add here what I say in my piece, which is something that we need to become more and more conscious of. Like I say that the Besharam Rang was one reason why the right objected to the film, but the Pasmanda Muslims objected to the film because they see it, Pathan identity, as also being extremely hegemonic and trying to say that, you know, this identity of the Indian Muslim is again reinforcing the idea that the Indian Muslim comes from the outside. Whereas 85% of Indian Muslims are actually, from here, from lower caste. And what happens, they don't find this kind of Pathaniyat in that sense, representative of their own life worlds. So we need to be conscious of all these complexities. And that's why I think what both Paromita and Bindu open up is this framework of being able to look at the ambiguities, to look at the contradictions, to look at the ambivalences and understand the film for what it is. I think both Sayantan and Bindu have a hand up. Yes, Bindu?
Just to add to, I agree largely with what everybody said, and I find what Swati's suggestion that there seems to be a kind of a splitting of cultural nationalism to certain other imaginations of nationalism at work here. That's really, that I think is really important. Also, it's interesting to think that how, I mean, to my older point, that we should also not lose sight of the production history as well. Like a spy thriller, allows this imagination of other locations, but there is an imagination of other spaces very actively here, right? Like Northwestern frontier, the larger South Asian audiences, landscapes like Dubai,
so which is different. You're saying from something like My Name Is Khan, because
it's kind of very the boundaries of the nation seem to be changing here as well in a very different manner. But the other thing which I wanted to also think about is that, and I also use it in the essay, which is that the kind of ideals that are political ideas that seem to be like, I mean, as all of us recognize, these are not like very clear formulations there, right? It's all actually strewn there for us to pick up, the audiences to read and so on. All of that is also, and especially in the context of the Pasmanda critique and so on, it's not a kind of imagination which is taking into account a new shaping up of the there is a new shaping up of the political taking place, which is not the older form of secularism, right? But what came around in the conversations around Pathaan is terms like, secular, etc. So I'm just thinking,
Amar Akbar and Thini
those were the references which came. So more than the film, this is what I'm trying to say, that the more than the film, it's kind of a fan ascribed kind of ideas that starts then defining more than what the film text itself is attempting. That's what my feeling is, and I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm saying that that's interesting, that's how the meaning starts unfolding as we watched,
as the linchpin opens.
Right, yeah. Right. Thank you,
Sayantan.
So yeah, I just wanted to add that because Swati spoke about family and nation and how that's these registers
your piece speaks about
one of the things that we find very interesting is that this nation, when we read Shah Rukh Khan in this hyper-nationalist narrative, the nation is saved by a chosen family. And this nation is saved by a chosen family that exists outside the nation that it's trying to save. This nation is saved by an identity that is that Pathaan takes to the point where the birth identity is obliterated. It's dead in the movie. So that's where I think this hyper-nationalist narrative is also transgressed. And this talks back to the kind of ambiguities that we've been talking about, that Bindu's been also highlighting. And this would be a way of, another way of repairing this narrative of hyper-nationalism that we are coming at. And I think these should be juxtaposed when we read what Shah Rukh Khan has been doing in context of hyper-nationalism, jingoism, etc. So
yeah. Yeah, you know, Sayantan, actually, this immediately brought something to my mind. One of the things that we as feminists have been looking at the question of nation and gender is how a nation has been feminized in the history of India. But it was and motherized, you know. And it was very interesting for me in a film like Swades, actually, as early as then, where Mohan Bhargava goes looking when he's looking for an NRI citizenship, goes looking not for his birth mother. He goes looking for his foster mother, yeah, or his dai. You know, so how the dai actually replaces the biological mother from as early as in that film, and the kind of way the different narratives that come around Shah Rukh Khan's cinema, actually, and how they little bit keep transgressing and keep tweaking a certain kind of patriarchal hypernationalism. No, it's very interesting. That we would do this. We don't know whether we'll edit this or not, but all right, who's going favorite scene? We are going to ask Paromita. Paromita, come on.
Favorite love scene, we have to say. No?
Favorite love scene.
Oh, I have a favorite love scene. No problem.
I have two.
So I mean, we all have about
many. But
the first favorite is from Dil Se, the terrace, and suddenly somebody comes and they go behind the door and they are so close together. I think it's like a very electric scene. I love it.
Absolutely.
Like one of my favorite Shah Rukh movies. And my second scene is a cliche, but I really love that scene, and it's the Aur Paas scene from So Pagal Hai. I mean, it's just so yeah.
That too. We all give a thumbs up to these, or no? I mean, they are the two that were absolutely brilliant. Yeah, Rukmini. I bolo.
एकदम बोलूंगी. जो है अनकही, जो है अनसुनी, वो बात क्या है बता. That's the song Mithua, but I think just the way in which it has been picturized and also the lyrics.
Yeah.
That love will find a way.
Well, we'll find a way. Sneha, I'm just going by who I'm seeing.
I think that scene, I mean, they'll say when the dupatta flies and he's looking at her. That gaze, I think.
Yeah, he's a master of gaze, no?
Yeah. And I think the other, which I think is very like typical of the romance that Shah Rukh brings, is from the song Main Yahan Hu, Yahan Hu, Yahan Hu in and you know, she's imagining him and he's like going around her and his eyes never leave her face. So yeah, I think those two.
Bindu, Sayantan, whoever.
Okay.
Sayantan.
Yeah, all right. So for me, it would be the basketball scene in Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. Not the one that's happening publicly, but the one that's happening in the night when Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol are playing by themselves. The kind of play and the kind of romance and the kind of friendship also that one sees there is just it stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah, Bishal?
So there are two moments which have have a huge I have become that fanatical fan and in these two moments. So one moment is in the movie Mohabbat. So
yeah,
whenever Amitabh Bachchan comes in the scene, no, the cinematography and everything is akin to horror movies. You know, throughout Mohabbatein, I was extremely scared of Amitabh Bachchan, like the way he speaks, his persona, his all black thing. There is this particular scene also when he talks to like Uday Chopra and the lights, you know, it's just like in
Yeah.
the lights.
Hey, we're talking about Shah Rukh Khan. We're not talking about Amitabh Bachchan.
Yes. So my thing is that because I was so scared of Amitabh Bachchan, whenever Amitabh Bachchan and Shah Rukh Khan are having a debate and his replies are like, my God,
And that dhol in that song, when he comes with that dhol, oh boy, yeah.
And
in the song.
Yeah. So whenever Shah Rukh Khan gives a comeback to, you know, like holds his ground, gives a comeback to Amitabh Bachchan, I just loved all of those scenes in Mohabbatein. And another thing is Rabbe Banadi Jodi, where I'm just in love with his, you know, this very insecure, soft,
Tani partner,
masculine thing whose only goal is to, you know, so that his partner loves him back. And it's not like that, you know, that you would be attracted to somebody else who is that insecure person, but it is Shah Rukh Khan who is playing that insecure person is what makes it so attractive.
The doubling, no? The doubling. Bindu?
Okay, I have many too. I have many moments from Dil Se, but very odd it might sound, but in Rise, actually, he cooks in the kitchen for Mahira Khan.
Yeah,
I love that entire sequence, right? So she's trying to kind of, you know, distract him. He doesn't allow her to. I think she's pregnant. It's that soon after that the sequence, and he's making mutton, and I absolutely love that whole sequence. Then then in Dilwale, the last sequence of Dilwale, where he actually reiterates almost like a recap of Dilwale, DDLJ. So that whole sequence. Yeah, so several. Yeah,
thanks. Yeah, I think it's very hard though to choose who's going next. Rukmini, Sneha, Pushpesh, yes, Pushpesh.
Yeah, so I'll just share one instance. So I like the lungi dance the most. Chennai Express. And I always go in the realm of sensory ethnography whenever I'm looking at that dance and song sequence. Where North is performing South, and this is a very liminal kind of a moment, you know. So I just feel like dancing with Shah Rukh Khan, of course, not replacing Deepika there, and feeling that moment and describing it as an ethnographer from my framework of sensory ethnography, the whole bodily sensorium.
Yeah, thanks. Sneha, Swati, yeah. Both of you are muted. One of you unmute.
Sorry. There are like two films which I think Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, where actually Kajol is very upset with him when they are in college, and he's getting close to Rani Mukherjee, and he's consoling her, and then Rani Mukherjee is slowly going away, and he just holds her hand, and so that is, I think, because I always feel that there is something which is friendship, which is most important part of our life. And so I don't know, at that point I thought that he's trying to preserve both friendship and whatever love here. And then again, going to Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, the favorite one, where
Palat.
And no, not Palat actually, but that Mehendi Laga Ke Rakhna song, where once in one particular couplet, Kajol says that ab kuch na kehna, ab kuch na karna. And after that, if we watch, and obviously I was in love with that film, so we watched it several times to understand कि हाँ उसके बाद उसने कुछ बोला है क्या. And he never spoke after that. He never does anything in that film, in that particular song sequence, anything. And so it was for us, it was, yes, that's the way you respect the way she conveyed it to him. And so that was most romantic part and romantic scene, I feel, from Shah Rukh Khan.
Sneha?
Said already the Dil Se scene and Veer Zara.
Acha. Okay. Deepa, did you say?
You're muted, Deepa.
Muted.
So like it's very difficult. I mean, there's so many. I mean, it's crazy, like almost every song. But before the stars, actors from Pakistan got banned. I mean, they can't, at one point they banned them from acting in Bollywood. So there was this exquisite looking person, Mahira Khan and there's a song in Rais which goes, Jo Teri Khatir Tadpe Pehle Se Hi, Kya Use Tadpana O Zalima. I love that. And she's also so certain, I would say, Islamic delicacy, but more modernized, that Mahira Khan has. So I feel it's such a loss that we will not get to see the romance between them. Of course, Fawad Khan is then, lost to us. So that is one. And the other one, and I'm not saying this is the best, because all of them are the best. See, I think this is Adil Hai Mushkil, right? Where Aishwarya has a cameo. But then this guy, what's the hero's name?
Abhishek
Ranveer
Kapoor, that's right.
So they have a smallish kind of fling, and then of course he goes back to whoever, and then she just comes back heartbroken, and there he is just standing or something that I remember. And so that part I really like. She had an affair and comes back, and he's there for her, without being patronizing. I thought that kind of love we rarely get to see. But of course, there are so many. We cannot end this if you ask such questions, Gita.
I know. Who's left?
You.
Me, yeah. So my two favorites were the ones that Paromita's already spoke about, the Dil Se one, and but for me, the moment of Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, when they have that football match and there's that sari which is sort of undoes, and then the game starts, was a high. But actually, the Kuch Kuch Hota Hai really happened for me in Chak De. In the last scene, when the goalkeeper Vidya is looking to him to say, and he looks and he says, "Look at me," and she magically looks, and he has figured, shit, ye to na to left pe maregi, na to right pe maregi, ye to seedha maregi. And that look finished me. And then she gets the goal and Kabir Khan wins. And that was my moment of a person who was told, never marry a Muslim, marry anybody else but not a Muslim. So I married him in that moment. He was Kabir Khan, the ultimate. So that was the moment for me. And thank you so much for these set of essays. I hope everybody enjoys reading them. Each one of you, thank you so much for sustaining this. And thank you doing sociology. Anything that any one of us wants to say? Yes, Rukmini, something?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Deepa?
And doing sociology.
Yes.
Thank you, Gita, and thank you.
You need to
doing sociology team.
You need to unmute.
No, I just, Gita said, anyone has anything? I said, you like gathered a community, like I say, Shahrukh gathers a community, and Warisha does that. So thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Also.
Thank you, guys. I hope we get more essays. I hope we get more. Let's keep it open-ended, Dipali, and let's get more essays in. Yeah? Okay.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.